evening, everyone. Welcome to the Leader's Edge. I'm your host tonight. My name is Sylvia, and this is episode 8 of season 6. Our guest this evening is somebody who is a crisis management. His topic is going to be how companies or organizations manage to thrive amid a crisis such as like this COVID pandemic by putting people first. Okay. Our guest is Sonny Coloma. For us Filipinos, you are very familiar with his face because he served in count them, he served 3 former Philippine presidents. He was the spokesperson, the presidential spokesperson of President Benigno Aquino Jr. He also served under President Joseph Estrada as Undersecretary for Transportation, and he also was the head of the Presidential Management Staff, the Deputy Executive Secretary of President Corazon Aquino. Mr. Coloma is, he taught at the Asian Institute of Management as a professor of business management. He was the Dean of Executive Education and the Associate Dean of the Master in Business Management program. He is also the director of the Master in Development Management program. Now, our guest is currently the publisher of Manila Bulletin. He joined this organization after his stint serving as the press secretary of President Benigno Aquino. He entered the organization as executive vice president. Now, he is currently the publisher. He is here with us today because he will talk about how organizations can thrive using our basic values and principles. He is an author of many books in human resource management and organizational development. He is the author of Diwa, Spirit-Led Organizations in the Philippines, which is what he will be talking about today. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome on the virtual stage, Sonny Coloma. Professor Coloma, how are you?
I'm fine, Sylvia. Thank you.
How is life without the stressors of the daily media briefings in Malacanang?
I'm fine. Thriving with COVID.
Thriving with COVID. You know, when I was first introduced to your topic, you sent me a copy of your book, Diwa. And when I was reading it, I thought that how timely it is to discuss this groundbreaking that every organization should go through this paradigm shift during this special time, because in your book, you mentioned that the major disruptor back then was the Asian financial crisis of 2008. And this is even bigger. So maybe we can start off by having like a check in the grassroots, because spirituality or anything related to the spirit, sometimes people think that that's a totally different sphere, and that is something that you don't really discuss in a business setting.
Okay, how did I get to that topic? One of the requirements for writing a doctoral dissertation is to do a literature research. And after my literature research, I was asked to summarize what I had learned. And I said, well, it's quite simple. The foundation of organization progress would be its vision, mission, objectives, key result areas, performance indicators, and so on. So that's the foundation. And how does an organization thrive and grow on top of that foundation? The answer is it must constantly change. It must constantly adapt. And there are two ways of adapting. One is to do it day by day, incrementally. Another type of change would be major changes that could be transformational, or when we say there would be a paradigm shift. But call it what you may, whatever kind of change takes place, the direction is toward improvement. And the direction of improvement is toward excellence, right?
Yes.
The direction of excellence is toward perfection. And when I encountered that word perfection, I think when we talk of perfection, it's impossible not to end up with God. Because God is the apex of excellence and perfection. And that is how the idea of spirit came into the picture. Because God is something supernatural. God is a concept that animates thought and consciousness. We're not talking of religion or organized denominations. We're talking of consciousness or an affinity of a person with a higher being. No matter that higher being is called. So that's what led to the title Spirit. First, it was spirit-driven organization, and it later modified into spirit-led organization. I proposed the theory or the hypothesis that what really animates, what makes organizations thrive and grow, is that certain kind of spirit that is the outcome or the destination of all organization development efforts, all efforts to improve, to progress, to grow. They will end up seeking excellence and perfection. And in the territory, there is no other ultimate destination but a God or a supreme being.
So can you say that it has to start from the top and go down?
Just say that it is a spirit that animates the entire organization and its entire processes, because an organization is not an inert or static concept. No? An organization is ultimately people that compose it. No? I remember one of our professors, Father Donelan, speaking at the anniversary of the bank where I used to work. And he said, okay, we're celebrating the anniversary of the bank today. What are we celebrating? Are we celebrating the day on which it says in the articles of incorporation, this was the day your company, your bank was registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission? Is that what we are celebrating? A legal reality? And then he said, maybe that's not what we're really celebrating. We're celebrating the life of the people that are working together and how this organization has made them grow, how this organization has sustained their families, and how this organization has been a place for them to develop their career and their profession. So he said an organization is something that is a living entity. And so we could also imagine that it, like a human being, an organization can be infused with spirit or animated by spirit. The same spirit that animates the people in it.
Can you say that this pandemic has helped impact transformation in companies so that this spirit can be part of the growth of any company?
I believe so, yes. Especially the far-reaching and the profound effects of a pandemic. It's not only a health crisis, it has also spawned an economic crisis. There's also a learning crisis because young people were prevented for more than a year from attending face-to-face classes, and their education was modified in a very major way.
Mhm.
There was also technology disruption, but at the same time, it is a technology acceleration, digital acceleration to be specific, and digital transformation. Many of the ways in which we do things have been changed.
Yes.
There's now Gcash. No? There's everything that we purchase is done online,
Online.
and so many day-to-day transactions that would have been impossible in a totally analog or physical contact world would have been in fact transformed. I think our friend, you know him too, Sylvia, Professor Rene Domingo came up with
Mm.
the concept of pivot or perish. Perhaps
Yes.
here with our viewers the concept of Professor Domingo, because
Okay.
he makes a distinction between essential and non-essential, as well as high touch and low touch. There you have it. On the horizontal plane, we have from the left side low touch, and then going to the right side high touch. And then on the vertical plane, from the bottom, it's non-essential to essential. And we would notice on the right side, for example, lower right side, hotels, gyms, salons, spa. These are all very high touch services, personal services. And
Mhm.
yet, the pandemic forced us to realize these are non-essential, especially because the high touch situation, which means the absence of physical distancing, leads to contamination and infection. And therefore,
Mhm.
those activities had to be stopped, and those activities had to be disrupted if we wanted to maintain the health of the community. On the other hand, we had essential transactions. So look at the list there: water, power, telecom, drugs, groceries, hospitals. Those are very essential, and yet they could be they're not really high touch. No, I mean they're for general consumption. There's no emotion involved. It's a no-brainer that you would need groceries every day, you
Mhm.
medicine and so on. No? And so these are the variables that were disrupted and affected by COVID. No? And we had a lot of people involved in the essential, even if low touch, and they became more prominent, and we call them the frontliners. No? Frontliners like the security guards,
Yes.
the baggers in the supermarkets, the cashiers, no? Because they were really at the front lines. Imagine how
Mhm.
we could have carried out without them. And in the digital parlance, these are called customer facing people. And customer facing people in the hierarchy of jobs in many organizations would not be the highest paid. They are somewhere near the bottom of the pyramid, because the highest paid are the researchers, the analysts, the financial guys, the techies, right?
Yes.
Whose specific know-how or skills are highly valued. No? But look at how COVID has transformed the landscape, and elevated the importance of the people doing essential services, especially the medical and health frontliners. So this is one of the important changes, no, that has really underlined the fact that people have to be respected, people have to be recognized as being in the forefront of the essential things that allow us to survive and thrive even in a pandemic situation.
So it it is something that actually disturbed me. When I read your book, I said there was a concept about sharing, that there are organizations whose very existence is to be able to share. And they are what you mentioned as economy of communion
Okay.
enterprises. And I felt that these are the organizations that should come out during a pandemic like this. Organizations that are really designed to be able to propagate the culture of giving, So I thought it was groundbreaking that there are organizations that are designed to do that. And maybe you can share what examples are existing here in the Philippines that are actually doing this kind of um, groundbreaking work, so to speak,
Okay,
because they're not profit oriented.
yeah, one of the organizations I studied was called Bangko Kabayan. It used to be called the Rural Bank of Bawan, Batangas. And eventually it transformed itself into a development bank. And its growth from a rural bank to a multi-branch development bank in the provinces of Batangas, Laguna, Cavite, and I think some parts of Rizal and Quezon, essentially in the Calabarzon area, was due to its unique philosophy of sharing, which is called economy of communion. And economy of communion is a concept developed by the Focolare movement, the founder of which is a lady by the name of Chiara Lubish. And Chiara Lubish and the Focolare members believe that the fruits of an enterprise, fruits translated into profits, would have to be divided among the owners and among the employees who work to produce it, and with the community, and that is the essence of economy of communion, because communion signifies a coming together, a solidarity of or a convergence of belief and interest, no, or of mission, and that is their philosophy. They do not believe, they do not limit the notion of profit making and profit taking just to be the right of the stockholders or those that invested into the company. They believe it should be shared in common among the shareholders, the employees that produce the wealth of the company, as well as with the communities that allow such enterprise to thrive. Look at the function of a bank. A bank functions because it is able to support businesses, enterprises in a particular community, but it is also supported by deposits. But in reality, the banks make money because of lending, no, and of loans.
Yes.
And therefore there is a mutual benefit between the bank and the communities that it serves. For as long as the bank enables the community to be productive, enables people to run profitable businesses, then they all share. No? They could all potentially share in the wealth that is created by the enterprise. So that is the concept that led me to a deeper study that the ends of enterprise could be pursued in a more humanitarian, egalitarian, and communitarian way, no? And not in the limited concept of stockholders or shareholders earning all the profits.
So this is really concretizing putting people first, because everyone involved in the business
Yes.
gets a share in the fruits of the business.
Yes, and according to one author that also guided me when I was doing my study, uh, the original paradigm of businesses was really a paradigm of communion or of the cross. Because let's examine one important reality of our lives, the way we reckon time. We are now in the year 2021, correct?
Yes.
And if you were to graduate, your diploma would read something like this, no? Given in Makati City or Manila, this 6th day of November in the year of our Lord, uh, 2021.
Yes. Yes.
Because we have ways of reckoning time, no? And this is the AD, no? Or Anno Domini. Anno Domini is in Latin, and in English it means in the year of our Lord. Before Anno Domini, we had BC, right? which
Yes.
before Christ.
Before
So
Christ.
time, as reckoned by the civilized world that we know now, is reckoned from the year of the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ. And this has nothing to do with whether you are Muslim, Christian, Catholic.
Mhm.
It's a globally accepted way of reckoning time, no, or the years. No? The other alternative, I think, is the one that's observed in Iran and other where they have a different. It's not 2021, no? But the globally accepted norm is 2021. So this author, uh, who was writing about the wealth of nations, no, said that it wasn't always that the wealth of nations was reckoned in terms of GDP or gross domestic product, because the
Yes.
GDP paradigm is a totally economic paradigm. No, it doesn't. For example, he said, "What about the effort of mothers to bring up their children?" No, that's not reckoned in GDP. It gets
Mhm.
recorded if a parent or parents would enroll a son or a daughter into a kindergarten, and that kindergarten will pay taxes to the government or will pay fees for licenses to operate. That's the way that the educations would be monetized into a contribution to the economy. But what the mother did to uh, to carry the child in her womb, to bring it out and rear the child during the infancy, toddler stage, and preschool.
Mhm.
That's not even recognized in the books of accounts of a country. No? All the and all those things. Those are, she said, the paradigm of that concept was a paradigm of sharing, of community welfare. When
Mhm.
it became GDP driven, then it was more of a dominating paradigm where power, no? Power is associated with economic wealth. And that is
Yes.
why the countries that are most militarily capable are also the wealthiest countries. That's the that's the
Mhm.
equation. They're the ones that are now able to produce nuclear weapons. They're the ones with the biggest arsenal of military firepower. They have the capability to cross the seas because of their modern navies. No?
Mhm.
And they're also the wealthiest countries. No? But is that the paradigm that we would like to have? No? So if we
Yes.
move that fast forward now, which is almost a decade from the time that I made my study, as we speak now, for example, there is a conference in Glasgow, Scotland, and it's called the Climate Change Summit, and they're talking about uh, sustaining the environment, no? Which is now everybody's business. No?
Mhm.
They agreed, for example, that they will phase out coal, which is the dirtiest fossil fuel. And they're doing this not because they were suddenly struck like Saint Paul on the road to Damascus. It's because they realized that either we all survive, no, or we all perish.
Perish. Yes.
Because if nothing is done to check global warming, no, uh, global warming, no, the temperature of the oceans is now rising, no, every day as we speak. No? And even if we go by the what they call the nationally determined contributions of the countries that signed the Paris Agreement in 2015, the world is on track to an increase of temperature that would reach 2.7 degrees Celsius. Can you imagine that? The
Oh.
target was one that it should not rise beyond 1.5. And then they committed certain amounts of reduction in their carbon emissions. But even with those commitments, at the rate that economies are growing now, the projection of the UN itself is that there will be a global warming by 2030 or 9 years from now of up to 2.7 degrees Celsius. No? So that's almost double. And what would be the effect, no, for countries like us that are climate vulnerable? It would be strong super typhoons like Yolanda or Haiyan, no, flooding, no, and who knows what other natural disasters would be triggered by global warming. So it's all coming coming to roost as we speak. No, it's all going full circle. That whatever you do, there would be consequences. No? And I think the world is realizing now that this is not just about doing good or trying to be righteous, but this is a matter of survival. And I think
Yes.
that is also one of the things that we had learned in COVID, no, that we have to discipline ourselves, accept a quarantine or a lockdown situation, because if we will not cooperate, we will all we will all be contaminated, and it could kill more of us. No? So I think those are the realities that have enabled us to rethink and to repurpose ourselves into a greater appreciation of values, no? And beliefs of on sharing and of caring for others.
And I think in your book you mentioned that it's it should always be for the greater good, for
Yes,
the good of the majority, because for a long time we have been, maybe organizations have already has always focused on their own bottom lines.
yes, and I think the issues at the climate summit now are very relevant, because when we talk
Yes.
of global warming, there are just a few countries that are responsible for the greater part of carbon emissions. But the reality is the negative effects of the carbon emissions, which is global warming, is felt most by those who contributed the least to the carbon emissions.
Yes.
Countries like us,
Yes.
we are not as industrialized as China, Russia, Poland, or India. No?
Mhm,
Look at us.
mhm.
We have a disproportionate share of typhoons and natural disasters. And that is why the term that they use now is climate justice. No? Where is the justice there? No? When the nations that are producing the least are the ones most hurt. So the justice should be in a reallocation of resources from the countries that have inflicted that harm, not because they are benevolent, but because that is what justice requires.
Yes.
Reparation, reparation and remediation of what needs to be remedied. No? So they're now saying, okay, by a certain year, carbon zero, no? or shifting everything from fossil fuels to electricity. For example, public transportation. They're now
Yes.
looking in the US. They're now looking at shifting to electric cars.
Mhm.
And as we speak now, hybrid cars are becoming more popular. So I mean that's what needs to happen: a radical shift, a paradigm shift, which in a way, or in a large way, COVID was able to impress or make people conscious about because of its widespread effects. No? So I think as a whole, the pandemic has been a tremendous learning experience for everybody.
Is there anything that local organizations can learn from the radical changes that are being implemented due to this COVID pandemic? Because a lot of the organizations, they had a change in the work schedule, business environment, but when things become normal, when the economy starts to open fully, are we not going back to where we were before?
I think we have to realize that the changes that COVID has wrought are quite profound, no, and quite deep.
Mhm.
And the important aspect really is behavioral change, no? And the change in mindset. For example, if you talk to a lot of people now, they would be saying that they've realized that there's so many things they could do more productively at home.
Mm,
They don't even
yes.
have to worry about traffic. They don't have to spend for gasoline. No? But I think there's also realization that not everything can be done remotely as well, no? Because there are many important, there's a lot of important work that requires collaboration, that requires team effort.
Mm-hmm.
And this could not be done remotely or virtually all of the time. So I think what is likely to emerge should be a hybrid. And this is also a realization in the field of education. We realize that many things could also be done. The technical term is asynchronously. You don't have to be at the same classroom all of the time. And because there's a wealth of online resources, you don't need to go to a physical library. You just need a laptop or even a smartphone with internet connection, and you could source all the information you need in the world. So I think just like what we were sharing before the show, this would be like the toothpaste phenomenon, no? or the genie out of the bottle. You could not put the genie back anymore, or in the same way that the toothpaste could not be put back. The changes wrought by COVID are just so profound and far reaching that we just need to build on those changes and enable ourselves to do better.
If you were to talk to the Filipinos who are now studying, having a hard time catching up with their school output, their workload for employees, is there like a silver lining in the horizon? Because the changes that we need to make are really changes that has to come from the organization. There also has to be institutional changes from government to help support the necessary changes that the private sector needs to do in order to move forward and build on the lessons that we learned from COVID. But for those who are in the receiving end, like for the college student who is grappling with bad internet connection and countless of deadlines, if you were to share a positive note, how can all of these things make better sense to them? Because we talk about values and the culture of giving.
I think, Sylvia, it's all in the framing. It's all in the context. We could not use the pre-COVID standards, no, to judge what happened during the pandemic. I'll give you a concrete example. In our group of companies, when COVID struck, we were halfway through an in-house executive MBA program where the classes were delivered by AIM professors face-to-face, in-house, within the company. We set aside 2 days in a week, no, for that. And then COVID struck. Were we going to wait for 2 years or whenever it would allow us to go back again? Of course not. So we needed to improvise. The same professors that were teaching it face to face developed their slideshow, their deck. We gave assignments, and to make the long story short, the students were all high performance, high potential middle managers of our group of companies, and that involves a newspaper, a hotel, a bank, and a university. They were all able to adjust and to adapt. And at the end of it, they felt very gratified. They did not mind that they had to crunch a lot of knowledge within a specific period of time. Because anyway, they were not at work physically. No? So they had a lot of me time or personal time to study. No? So those are the offsets. No, there are offsetting factors. But the bottom line is, despite the limitations, could you imagine, for example, uh, finance, no, being taught uh, virtually, no? But somehow
Yes.
they
They
adjusted,
manage.
and they felt gratified, and they felt good that they were able to follow, and everybody felt good about it and felt better about it, and there was no gnashing of teeth or or weeping that we were not able to meet. But on the contrary, there was a feeling of satisfaction of having overcome what were thought to be insuperable difficulties, of being able to transcend the limitations of the situation, because the challenge was there. We needed to make do of the situation, because we knew that when business operations would return to normal, then it would be more difficult, as they found it difficult when we were holding face-to-face classes. No, they had to carve out uh, 2 days out of every week, and when they would be in class, there would always be competing demands from the office. They would
Mm.
excuse themselves, they would go out of the classroom, they had to call clients. So these things kind of offset each other, no? And I think for many of the things that had to be adjusted, they will normalize at a certain level. And what's key here, I think, is the transformation of mindset,
Yes.
the realization of being empowered, that in spite of all the difficulties, the challenges, and most importantly, the psychological impact. No? There's so many of us that lost so many friends, so many dear relatives, in a manner that we never would have imagined, that we would just know it through a text. There is no opportunity to condole with the family. You would just hear about somebody, and then we would just be exchanging text messages via Viber. No? But for instance, no, speaking about my AAM class, do you know that one of the benefits of COVID now is that our class, which graduated 43 years ago, no, is now meeting every week. No?
Oh,
And the number of people showing up would be from just under 20 to about 30 to 35, which is quite big. Huh? And do you know what we're doing? It's a rosary fellowship.
wow.
And the other night, we just had a memorial mass for our dearly departed classmates. Out of our original class of 120, 14 had passed away. No? And so we invited their spouses, their children to join us. But uh, the essence of what I'm sharing is there are people in our class that are living in Canada, US, Australia. We meet at 8:30 in the evening, and that's almost midnight in Australia.
Mhm.
That's 4:30 or 5:30 in the morning in the west coast of the US. So our Californian classmates had to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, their time. But they're all game, no? And we're happy because we're able to meet. So how can we fault COVID as a villain in all this? No, when we discovered ways of being together, ways of bonding and of renewing our ties, and I think we could extend this example to so many other facets of our lives, no, and discover that there are really many opportunities for humanity to get closer together, for people in companies to be more empathetic in appreciating the situation of their coworkers, their office mates, no? And this is something that in the end could be very beneficial, don't you think so?
So it is really refreshing to hear this from you, because when we listen to the news, we always hear the negative things about how COVID has impacted on industries, on livelihoods, and um, many small micro businesses. But a lot of times, when you look at the humanity, the human side of an organization or a business that has gone under, it really does have a different face. A business may have closed down, but the family that owned the business became closer because they began to pray together, they spent more time together, they found ways to cope together. And
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Sylvia. You will recall that sometime last April, there was this 26-year-old young lady from UP Village or Teachers Village in Quezon City,
mhm,
and she started a community pantry. Do you remember that?
yes,
That's
yes.
Patricia Non. No, her name is Patricia Non, and I was amazed at how it spread like wildfire. No? So here is a very challenging situation: hunger. No? So many
Mhm,
people going hungry because of widespread joblessness. And in other climes, in other times, this would have sparked riots or well, some kind of civil disorder because of the extreme circumstance. No? But instead of that, we saw so many good-hearted, kind-hearted people
mhm,
voluntarily taking out something from their cupboard or from their pantry, establishing spontaneously a community pantry. And it all started with just one Facebook post. And that shows up one other element here, no, which is the power of social communication, no, social media that
mhm,
has also transformed our lives. And I think that's an example that shows us that even in a time of extreme need, uh, the goodness, the inherent kindness of people would eventually emerge, no, and demonstrate itself in acts like this, because this was replicated in so many places in the country: Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, Christian,
yes.
non-Christian, indigenous peoples, even the members of the military setting up their own community pantry.
And
uh,
the concept is so simple.
yes,
It is so Filipino because it's bayanihan, the bayanihan spirit at its best.
yes, I'm glad we got there, no, because we began with spirit, no, and spirit is diwa, no? Spirit, thought, consciousness. And the spirit is that of being of loving God and loving neighbor, no? Or being a caring person, which is about kapwa, no? In
Mhm,
Filipino, we have this concept of malasakit, which is really going out of your way, be showing or demonstrating compassion and kindness
mhm,
to your neighbor, especially in times of extreme difficulty or extreme need. Now, expanding this to the community, we have this classic painting by our national artist, Botong Francisco, no, Carlos Botong Francisco, and it's entitled Bayanihan. And it's a community that is carrying on its shoulders a nipahat, no,
mhm,
transferring the house, no, from one place to another. And we call this Bayanihan. I think COVID has enabled the spirit of Bayanihan to manifest itself in many ways and in many places in our country.
mhm.
And this is the reason why somehow we were able to cope with the many difficulties imposed by the pandemic, even as we realize, no, that the effects are really quite serious. No?
Yes.
Our country is struggling to grow by 3.4%, I think, by the year end, when the original forecast was more than 5%. Last year, our economy contracted by almost 10%. And these are very serious economic realities that
Mhm.
are facing us, and as we make choices next year when we vote for a new set of leaders. So I think
Yes.
the last 1.5 years have really been very educational in terms of teaching us many lessons.
Mhm.
Uh, the combination of a health crisis, an economic crisis, and a learning crisis have really been very challenging, but at the same time, these have brought us to a realization of many resources that we have that could also be tapped into and mobilized. So we could all work together to build a better normal.
That gives me much comfort that despite all of these things, it is true that the Bayanihan spirit, our natural culture of having malasakit and caring for one another will somehow tide us over to next year. And if there is um, something that you'd like to leave our viewers for, because there are still how many months before next year's elections, and when the pandemic is still here, the numbers are going down, infection rate is going down. The spirit, you said you said so yourself, Diwa. We have a consciousness. The Filipino has a certain consciousness and uh, a natural love for one another. Is there anything that you would like to remind us and our viewers? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a person who has seen the worst in the three presidents that he served, the worst situations, and yet it is amazing that he remains upbeat and very optimistic, and he's able to share his optimism through his classes and his books.
Well, thanks for this opportunity, Sylvia. Perhaps I could share some, well, three takeaways. First is the importance of people. People are most important in our country, community, and companies. We must always put people first. Whatever the figures or the statistics, let's remember that there are real people with real problems, real concerns being
Mhm.
affected. And we have to take stock on how this will affect real people. Second is that people are imbued with spirit and they are inherently good. They act on their values and beliefs that should be channeled toward the common good. Let's just take a very uh, easy example. When we work, we call it trabajo, no? But trabajo is a Spanish word.
Yes.
In Filipino, the word that is equivalent to work is hanap buhay.
Mhm.
Let's pause for a while. Hanap buhay. And we could translate that into something else. Hinahanap ang kahulugan ng buhay.
Ah.
I think that when people work, when people use their God-given talents and resources to produce ideas, to produce wealth, then they're really grounded on values and beliefs toward contributing to the common good and making their lives and the lives of others more meaningful. Because we are inherently drawn towards others. We are
Mhm.
drawn to our kith and kin, to our parents, siblings, relatives, to our friends, to a community. We are a humanitarian and communitarian race. And we have these innate values that we could tap into elevating our status as a community or as a nation. And thirdly, we should mobilize the spirit of Filipino bayanihan in building a better future for our country, our families, and ourselves. And on top of this, I think we should also keep our sense of humor. I think that's one of the virtues of Filipinos, no? Through thick and thin, we always find humor in it. Although now it's different. No? Before it was pure humor. Now that's taken on some other dimensions because of technology and social media and fake news. No? But what I wanted to say is that for our mental well-being, for our emotional equilibrium, let's face this reality. No? What external events and what other people would do to us, we are not able to control those. No?
Mhm.
But there is one thing on which we have 101% control, and that is how we will react or how we will respond. If we react with disdain or with disgust, if we react with hatred or or enmity, then we make ourselves more miserable. But
Yes.
we could change the framing. We could change the paradigm, no, into something that that would be more beneficial, not just to ourselves but to our loved ones, our families, our communities. And I think for this we just need to maintain a sense of balance. I make light of it when I say let's keep our sense of humor, but that's what it is all about. Uh,
Mhm.
let's take it light and breezy. Let's let's believe in the possibility of something better. After all, as they say, the darkest dawn is just before sunrise, or
Yes.
just before the presence of sunlight. And I think if we adopt that kind of positive attitude and of a sense of possibilities, no, a sense of well-being, then we'll all be better off.
Thank you very much, Sunny. That is the best way to end this nice chat that we had today. And I hope, Sunny, that you will maintain that optimism and you will be able to share this gift. Oh, may
Yeah.
I share your book?
Yes, of course.
Because
Yeah, but before that, no. Anyway, you could decide what to do with this later on. No, but
yes.
I think there was a point you were raising, and this was often asked of me. How is it that I'm able to seem to be unflappable or not to be harassed, or and I have to tell the story. You know, it was it was taught to me by a fellow professor. No? His name is Andres San Agustin, who
Hmm.
who also taught at AIM. And before I took on, no, that specific duty, no, see, I was communication secretary from day one of President Noynoy Aquino, but towards the midterm, he also asked me to act as his spokesperson, no, to be part of the team that would conduct the daily press briefings, and that was the daunting task, no, being exposed to media day in and day out. So I asked some advice from this fellow professor, and he said, "Why don't you try this mantra? No, you know about mantra. No? When you do transcendental meditation,
Meditation.
you recite a certain mantra, and the mantra puts you into a serene uh, state of mind." And what were the mantras that he suggested to me? Number one mantra: when you face the media, uh, I'm the first mantra would be, "I'm glad I'm here." Why I'm glad I'm here? Well, because you need to be happy about what you're doing,
Mhm.
and you would have to accept that this is something that is very important to you and to them. To them, it's very important because it's their source of livelihood, and by doing your work, you're also enabling them to do their work. So I'm glad I'm here. The second mantra would be, I'm glad you are here. So when you join I'm glad we're here with I'm glad you're here, then you establish common ground. The third mantra would be, I know, I know that I know that I know. I
I
know,
know
I
that
know
I
that I
know
know that I know. And
that
it
I
is
know.
conscious acknowledgement of God's gift of wisdom.
Mm.
You know that you know that you know. You were given the wisdom and the talent to communicate, to write, to speak, and that is something that should be employed for the good of as many people. And the fourth is a mantra of kindness and compassion. I care for you. And I'm saying this not just to the media reporters, but to our audience out there, no, to the Filipino people that must be informed. You were saying earlier the news is always bad, but you know, people have learned to live with it, and they want to know the real score. And well, COVID is really about horrible statistics of millions, hundreds of thousands getting ill, dying, but that's the reality. That's why it's a pandemic. No? But we need to see beyond the figures. We need to see beyond the realities and really see people and feel for them and care for them. And I think with that kind of a mindset and a heart set as well, that is what enabled me to do my work.
Thank you very much, Sonny Coloma. The mantra again, I am glad I am here. I am glad you are here. I know that I know that I know. And the last one is,
I
oh
care
no,
for you.
I care for you. So thank you very much. That was an energetic and lively session. I am glad that you were able to spend time with us for
Pleasure.
today's episode of The Leader's Edge. Thank you very much, Sonny Coloma. Your wisdom, if you want to hear more about his ideas about sharing bayanihan, how organizations can pass through this disruption and come out to be even better because we put our own people first. You may check his book. The name of the book is Diwa. Here it is. Diwa, Spirit-Led Organizations in the Philippines, Charting Pathways to Excellence. You can order your copy in this website. And he also has another book. That other book is Kapwa, which is also available through the PMAP website. So get a copy so that we can hear and read more about this groundbreaking theory. And I feel that more organizations should become aware that it is doable. And there are organizations, there are so many companies, Filipino companies, which successfully transition into organizations that really care for their employees, for their consumers, and even their own suppliers. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Sonny Coloma. Join us in our next episode when we will talk about leading in the pandemic times, from resilience to results. We're going to talk to Professor Ajanta Dharmasiri. Thank you very much. And learning is a never-ending journey with limitless vistas.